Welcome. You're listening to How I Did That, a storytelling podcast. Let's jump into today's episode.
Hi, Ling Ling. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for inviting me.
I invited you on because, I've been following you for a while, see all of your delicious food, and I wanted to get the lowdown on kind of like how you got into food blogging, kind of on the vegan diet and photography and everything in between.
Yeah, so I was born in China and I moved to Canada when I was 2 years old, and I grew up in the city of Vancouver. I started cooking and baking when I was about 7 years old, and I grew up with a talented home cook mother and grandmother, and they both spoiled me with all their delicious foods. And that naturally, I kind of wanted to help out in the kitchen, so they taught me some stuff, and then that's how I started to cook.
What were your influences? Like 7 years is pretty young to be in the kitchen. Like a lot of people I know, they didn't start getting into cooking or baking until high school, maybe when they had a bit more free will, I guess, to be like, this is what I want to buy, this is what don't want to buy. But like, how did you get into that at such a young age?
I don't know. I guess I've always just felt a natural pull towards the kitchen and wanting to make food because I'm a big foodie. I love trying new foods. So I guess little me just wanted to see if I could make those foods myself because it looked pretty fun. And I guess it was also, and it still is, a way for me to creatively express myself.
Did you just start cooking out of cookbooks, or like you said, your mom's and your grandma's recipes? And then as you got older, did you start looking at, some of your favorite food bloggers online, or how did that come about?
So back then, my mom and my grandma, they didn't use any recipes. They kind of just cooked whatever in the kitchen with whatever ingredients we had. So I didn't actually start following recipes until later on when I got older and I went to the library and borrowed cookbooks myself. So it was kind of just, I don't know, helping cut vegetables in the kitchen and watching them make different Chinese dishes. But as I got older, I started experimenting with more of my own recipes and foods that I like to eat, like Western foods, especially cooking, because my grandma and my mom, they didn't really bake because they didn't grow up with ovens in their kitchens.
When you say they didn't grow up with ovens, like I'm thinking, because like my family's Indian and like my grandparents, they came here from India, but like they don't really bake either. I feel like a lot of Asian households, it's more cooking, like the grandparents and the
Yeah,
mom, right? But like not really into baking as much. And maybe it's because they didn't have those appliances growing up. That's a good point. I never thought of that. I was like, because one
yeah,
time, like my grandma made this stir fry, this little thing that we put in a lot of Indian foods is like we'll stir fry onions, garlic, ginger, and we'll like put that as the base of a lot of our foods. And she had made the stir fry in advance and like had kept it for whatever she was gonna soup or whatever she was gonna make. And I thought it was apple crumble. So I took a big I took a giant bite and I was like, I spit it out right away. And I was like, oh, like, why in the world did I think my grandma would be making apple crumble? Like, of course not. And so what kind of recipes, like what were some of your kitchen staples?
I distinctly remember the first thing that I learned to cook by myself when I was 8 years old was banana pancake, but it wasn't like the traditional Western type pancake where it's really fluffy. The kind that I cooked was, I don't know, it was just more dense, but it was really chewy and it was really good. And I remember being really happy to know how to cook it by myself.
Is that banana pancake a certain type of Chinese dish, or was it just like you made it more dense just because you were experimenting?
I don't know. It was just what my mom made for us for breakfast
Oh,
all the
okay.
time. Didn't know how to make it fluffy and stuff until I started cooking more by myself.
Hmm.
So from there, I would just borrow cookbooks from the library and then flip through the pages, see if there's easy stuff to make. So when I was younger, I was kind of scared to make really hard dishes, so I just started with the easy stuff like burgers. Yeah, just the easy dishes that you can prepare as a 8-year-old.
You said that you like your mom and your grandma, they didn't bake as much because like they grew up more with cooking, but did you start baking like brownies, cookies, cakes, all of that and using the oven at a young age as well?
Actually, I didn't. I wanted to, but my mom didn't really want to get me measuring equipment and stuff because, oh yeah, another thing is they didn't use measuring equipment to like cook because, cooking for your family, you don't really need to measure that precisely. And for baking, you kind of do need to measure everything out. So we started off without a lot of baking equipment, so it was kind of hard for me to bake anything, but I begged my mom to get me some baking stuff, and yeah, I slowly started to try recipes and cookbooks. And
Starting off from 7 years of age, how did it progress? I'm guessing you liked it because now you're like doing something related to food, but how did it go from that to, by the time you were 12, 13, 14, did you start experimenting with other things? So, how
yeah,
did it kind of branch out and grow your passion after you started in the kitchen then at that age?
I guess I just started cooking and experimenting more in the kitchen on my own. And then it wasn't until many, many years later that I started posting some of the foods I make on my Instagram account. I actually had an old account that I started in 2017 where I posted really ugly looking food pictures of like all the foods that I make. That's how I started sharing my passion for cooking and baking with others. I didn't post any recipes at that time. I kind of just shared what I was making in the kitchen, and I thought that was really cool that I could have a platform to express my creativity. So that's where it went. So in early 2021, I decided to create a new account because my old account wasn't getting anywhere and I didn't like how my feed looked. It was all a bunch of random foods that didn't really fit together. So when I made the new account, I started following lots of other food bloggers and learning about food, blogging through free resources. And then it wasn't until mid 2021 that I decided to create my own website. And I guess that's when my passion for food and food photography turned serious, a time demanding hobby.
When you said you started posting your food online way back, like a few years ago, was this on Instagram? And this was
Yes.
probably when Instagram was like just starting to be more popular. We can fast forward to the pandemic, right? Because then 2020 hit. So did that affect anything at all in terms like were you always planning to be like, I want to take this seriously? Or was there something that changed during the pandemic? Because during COVID, a lot of people kind of changed the way they viewed how their life would look like in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, so it was actually the pandemic that gave me the opportunity and the little nudge to start the food blog because all the schools shut down and there was nothing else to do. So it was kind of like my pandemic project that continued later on. It took me more than a month to launch my website because designing and customizing was not my thing. And I kind of felt like giving up at one point, but I persisted through. And I didn't have a budget to hire help, so it was just all me on my computer trying to figure out how to use WordPress. And I also transferred some of my old recipes from my old Weebly.com site. So I actually had that when I had my old Instagram accounts, but I didn't really share it that much because I didn't like how the site looked. I mean, it wasn't that customizable. Um, so yeah, I transferred some of my old recipes that I thought were pretty good, and I gave them new life by taking new pictures and like retesting the recipes. So I launched my site with I think it was like 10 of my old recipes already on there, and then I just went from there.
Is it a registered business as well?
I have not registered my business yet, but I do have a registered domain.
If somebody were in your position like a few years ago, how would they go about and what resources would they use to be like, okay, well, I want to design a website and specifically a food blog. How did you go about it to getting it to where you are now?
Okay, so in the beginning, I didn't have a budget for courses, so just staked out all the free resources I could possibly find on the web for like all aspects of running a food blogging business. And I listened to a lot of podcasts, which gave me a lot of insight. With those free resources, I started like piecing together all the information and then just going for it. I didn't really feel fully prepared at any point. It was kind of just like going along with it and seeing where everything leads me. So for WordPress, after I got my domain, I bought like a theme, and then I started customizing my website. It took me like a little more than a month to get my website up because I wanted to make sure that everything was ready to go. And there was like a lot of things to do.
Were there any food bloggers who you took inspiration from in terms of their website layout?
When I was learning about everything, I remember watching a lot of Joni Simon's The Bite Shot videos on like the technical aspect, and I also followed like all the big vegan food bloggers like Rainbow Plant Life and Barley and Sage.
Okay, so you got your website like up and running. Did you focus on like SEO at all at the time, like search engine optimization, making sure your website was ranking in Google, or were you just more focused on like, I just want to create it and put out like recipes for fun?
At that time, I don't think I even knew what SEO was. I just wanted to like have a website that looked really nice that I could share my recipes on with recipe cards and all those things I didn't have when I had my Weebly website. But yeah, later on, I discovered that you can monetize your blog. So I started working towards creating um, higher quality posts that could rank on Google and that could get more page views and all that. But of course, I was still doing what I loved and sharing the recipes that I loved.
Did you take any professional photography courses or was it all self taught? And how long did it take you to teach yourself to like go from where you were to the way your pictures are presented now?
So for photography, it's also kind of a story that started when I was around the same age that I started cooking. When I was younger, I also liked to take photos of stuff. So my mom bought me like this little pink camera, DSLR camera. It's like really small. And then I would take pictures everywhere I went. And it wasn't necessarily of food, but I just really liked taking pictures. And then I remember at one point I put down the camera and I kind of forgot about how fun photography is. And then it wasn't until I went to high school in grade 8 that I took photography as an elective, and my photography teacher helped me reconnect with the visual arts. When I took photography in school, I learned how to use a DSLR camera, I learned the different photography techniques, and this was for like just photography in general, not necessarily food photography or anything. And then I found all that to be really cool. So I took photography as an elective again next year, and then 2 years after that. And then that's when I decided to buy my own DSLR camera. That was also around the same time that I wanted to start creating a food blog. So I guess it kind of just all fit together. School was the only place I learned how to do photography. Other than that, food photography specifically, I kind of self taught myself by observing what other people are doing, how their photos look, and just looking at the little details like composition and lighting and color. And then it took some lots of experimenting and trying to take my own photos to like get where I am now. And I still have a lot to learn about food photography, but yeah, it's mostly through observing. I didn't take any food photography courses, but through free resources here and there were like a few little bits of information that I kind of gathered too. Tricks to like photograph ice cream or something.
What kind of camera do you have?
I have the Nikon D5200 with the 55 millimeter lens. So that's what I started out with. But then earlier this year, I got a new lens. I think it's a Tarman 24 to 70 millimeter. It's a little bit bigger and it kind of allows me to take better photos too, I guess.
Nice. So it can like go from 24 to 70. So it's probably more flexible in terms of like you want close up shots. I had the kit lens that I got. It was like 15 to 25. And I didn't realize actually, because I actually never realized the difference between the millimeter number of the lens because I watched a lot of YouTube videos and like nobody explained it really well. And then I watched this one where this person actually compared a shot of like a 15 versus like a 50 versus a 100 piece of like loaf of bread.
Mhm.
And it was drastically different to the point where like the bread looked distorted in the smaller number, like the smaller millimeter.
Mhm.
And I was like, wow, like if it actually makes this much of a difference, no wonder sometimes in professional food blogging, you can take the exact same picture, but you're like, why isn't it looking the same? Like my lighting is the same, my color is the same. And sometimes it really is like the lens distorts it a little bit, which is interesting to me. I never
Yeah.
really realized that until this year. Like I've seen it on your Instagram stories where you had like the C stand, I think it was, and you had like softbox lighting or other food photography props. So when did those come into the picture? Because that's when it's like, okay, it's professional. I need these. I'm not just shooting it with sunlight, which I know people do, and it works great. But with
Yeah.
sunlight, it's like on and off. Sometimes it's cloudy,
Yeah.
sometimes it's not. And when the sun sets, you can't take photos anymore. So when did you get all the professional equipment? And then what would you recommend if someone's on a budget and they want to get these professional pieces of equipment? What would be the main most important pieces of equipment you could recommend and like budget friendly?
So I think there's definitely a lot of equipment that you could invest in as a food blogger, but not all of them are necessary for every individual because your circumstances could be different than other people's. So some factors that could help you determine what products to invest in would include your geographical location, your budget, and your expertise level and such. You can start with a small collection of props that fit your photography style and gradually grow your collection over time. An affordable way and unique way to grow your prop collection is by shopping your local thrifts and antique stores. So, this one time I went prop hunting and I visited like half a dozen thrift stores in Vancouver, and I found a lot of cool glassware and utensils that I use in my food photography. So, that's really affordable. Next is backdrops. So most of my backdrops are handmade with materials from my local department store. Like I painted my own boards and everything. And there's like lots of YouTube videos that show you how to make your own backdrops. And there are also a lot of food photography backdrop stores online. But I have found that they're a little bit more expensive. But I'm sure their quality and their durability makes up for that. So if you have a bit of a bigger budget, you can definitely invest in those. So camera. It doesn't really matter what camera brand you buy, but Nikon and Canon are two of the most popular and trusted brands. So I'm not a DSLR camera expert, so I would recommend that you find your local camera store and talk to a sales associate because they do know a lot. Because when I first bought my camera, I told the guy from my camera store that I do food photography, and he helped me find and recommended me a couple of affordable and suitable camera and lenses for me, and that's how I got my current camera and my beginner lens. So even if you have a bigger budget, you can still ask an expert to help you pick out a right camera, because one good thing to remember that I have to remind myself sometimes is that having a good camera doesn't automatically result in good pictures, because you're in control of how your photos turn out, not your camera, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, okay, so next is tripod. A tripod will make your life so much easier when you're shooting, especially if you want to take action shots or if you want to use a low shutter speed on your camera. And it'll help stabilize your camera and allow you to adjust the height and the angle of the camera easily. Okay, so the next big thing is lighting. Lighting plays a huge part in taking high quality photos. If you live somewhere where it's always bright out and you happen to have a place by the window to shoot, then you don't necessarily need to buy artificial light when you first start out. I shot with natural light for like a few months in the summer, and it wasn't until winter when I realized that the days were a lot shorter that I bought my first artificial lights. So if you were to buy artificial light, there's like a lot of different types of artificial light, like continuous or strobe, and there's also a lot of factors that go into deciding what other equipment you need to support the lighting. But the general setup includes a source of light, a reflector to soften the shadows, a diffuser to disperse the light evenly on the setup, and one or multiple C stands to hold up reflectors, diffusers, backdrops, and cameras. Um, like I mentioned before, I would recommend checking out Joni from The Bite Shot. She covers all of these technical aspects of photography really well. And she also has a whole page of resources and recommendations of products on her site, which I look through every time I want to invest in a new equipment.
Since you're in
Yeah.
Canada, do you have a value village where you live?
Yes,
Okay.
I do. And I also went to another one in Vancouver that was a little farther from where I live, and I also found a lot of stuff there. That day I went prop hunting, I went to two value villages and a bunch of different small antique stores.
Nice. I like that because every thrift store, even if it's like a value village chain, they won't have all the same things because it's like
Yeah.
whoever drops off things to that location in my area, that's the stuff that value village is going to carry. I'm assuming all of them, since they're like items from different people. It's not like, oh, here's our collection of gray linen napkins and like every thrift store has the same. They're
Mhm.
not going to have that. Sometimes with value village, you have to buy, like, you find a really nice plate and you're like, I only need two, but it comes in like a set of 12 and then you have to buy all of them.
Yeah,
Your place does
yeah.
that too, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, this one time I found like this really nice plate, and I wanted to buy just two, but I realized it was like like you said, a set of 12, and I tried to ask the sales associate if I could just take the plates, but then he didn't let me. So,
Yeah. So yeah, they try to sell them in batches, but it is a very good resource.
besides shopping thrift stores, the other store that I really like to get props from is Crate and Barrel. They are a little bit more expensive, but their glassware is really nice, and they have nice napkins. That I have like a couple. I didn't buy a lot because, like you said, they're like $15 or something.
But they're really
But
nice. I know what you mean.
yeah,
I can't find the exact same texture at Value Village. So like if you ever see
yeah,
Broma Bakery, if you ever seen like Broma Bakery's pictures,
hmm
like
yeah, yeah.
I think she's the one who like recommended it on her website once. So I went and looked and I was like, oh, this is the kinds she uses underneath her like skillet cookie or something. It looks really nice.
Yeah. So the thing about buying from stores is you're kind of buying from where everyone else is buying. So what I like about shopping thrift stores is you're making a prop collection that's unique to you, and it's also a nice way to repurpose things that people are donating. But I guess sometimes you can't find exactly what you're looking for, so then you would have to invest in like brand new props and stuff.
Cool. Also, you mentioned that you make your backdrops yourself, like for the ones you painted. How do you do that?
So I just bought like wooden boards from my Home Depot, the size that I wanted, which is I think it's the standard backdrop size that like photography backdrop stores sell. And to paint it, I just used wall paint. I think it's matte. So when I first made my backdrop, I knew that I wanted to paint it like whitish, grayish, make it like as light as possible because when you're first starting out with photography, that's kind of the easiest way to shoot. So yeah, I just like painted both sides of two backdrops, two boards. One side is grayish and one side is whitish, so that then I can like use it interchangeably. But yeah, that's what I used for the most part, and I still use it now. And then in the fall, I wanted to make a backdrop that was more fall themed, so I got new boards and then I painted it like orange peachish color. But then I found that was really hard to shoot because the light wasn't reflecting off the backdrops as well as white backdrops. And then earlier this year, I wanted to buy a backdrop that had like the kitchen tiles. I got that from a backdrop store that was relatively cheaper compared to the other big ones.
In terms of photography now and your blog, do you post things like just for fun or are you doing it for monetization purposes? Like, do you get food photography clients? How do you go about that? Like, what is your goal with your blog right now?
In terms of the monetization, I worked with brands for sponsored content and food photography, and that's where I get most of my income for my blog. For the recipes I just share them for fun and hope that they do well on Google. I have noticed that my recent recipes are doing better on Google than my older ones, and I think it's because I'm focusing more on SEO and like using the right keywords, and hopefully I'll get enough page views one day to put ads on my site, and that would also be another way to earn a little income. But yeah, working with brands is my main source of income for my blog. Pitching to brands and all that was also something that I had to figure out, and it took a while for me to gain enough confidence. But after listening to a bunch of podcasts and like reading all those free resources, I started pitching to brands 1 or 2 months after I started my website. And I started by reaching out to local vegan brands. There's also a lot that goes into reaching out to brands. But what I do is the first thing that I do is I find them on Instagram and I connect with them through Instagram and ask them for a contact email for if I wanted to pitch like a collaboration idea. So if they give me an email, great, and I can proceed. If not, then I respect that. So through email, I would kind of introduce myself, tell them what services I have, and what value that I can bring to the table to help the brand. And I would also send my media kit with the email and link to my work with me page on my website, which has like this client questionnaire and a link to my portfolio. And yeah, I kind of just go from there.
Okay, so is Instagram your main way of connecting with brands?
Yes, unless they don't really have like a strong social media presence, then I would just go to their website directly and try to look for an email to contact. But I learned that if you kind of make a presence on social media first, you're more likely to get a response via email because they kind of like they can kind of see your account as the first impression and not just like an email,
Mhm.
and then they might feel more inclined to reply to you if they know that you're on social media and you're supporting the brand through social media. And
If someone were to go on Instagram and be like, okay, I want to connect with clients, but how do you even go about finding clients in your niche? Because there's like probably millions of Instagram accounts out there.
so I would recommend starting with your local brands that fit your niche. Like, so for me, it's like vegan food brands. I've discovered a lot of vegan brands from Vancouver lately that are just starting up. So that would also be a good way for you to um, offer your services to those new brands. When they're first starting up, they might need photography or some recipes using their products. So that's kind of how I got my first client. Was I used a product that they were going to launch, like a new product, in a recipe. And I remember it did really well, and I was really happy with it. And they
Nice.
were also really happy with the job that I did, even though it was my first client and I didn't completely know what I was doing.
There are some people who live in like places where there's not a lot of vegan influence in the area. So if somebody's trying to do this from a place or even like somebody in a different country, they might not have the same type of like vegan companies in their area like we might have living in like Canada or the US. So then if
Mhm.
Instagram were your only way to connect with clients, how would you go about that? Like how would you find them? Like was it through certain hashtags? Would you look for certain products online and like try to go find these people on Instagram?
I guess I would start by looking at some of the products that you already use and you buy from your local grocery store.
If you're I realized actually because like if you're shooting sponsored content for a company and you need to find their products, I don't know if this happened to you, but a lot of times companies reach out and then they're like, sorry, we don't ship to Canada. And I'm like, oh, but if I had just found them first in my grocery store, I know that they ship to Canada because they're in my grocery store. And that would be perfect because like
Yeah,
you're not finding brands that won't even ship to your area that then if you start there.
yeah. Yes, I would see which brands that you usually use or you find in your grocery store or that you admire, and then I would go on their website and try to like find like an email or a contact to reach out to. Um, and sometimes the brand might be known for working with influencers and food bloggers, so they might even have like something on their site that mentions that and ways that you can connect with them. So yeah,
Nice.
definitely do your research before reaching out to them.
I think that's awesome because especially like if I were looking at it through the eyes of somebody starting like a vegan food business, like if I'm making, like, there's actually a vegan deli that opened near me that sells like vegan meats and cheeses. So something like
Mm,
that, you're offering vegan food products. Those people might not necessarily know the photography part of it, and for sure, like, if you have a business, you people eat with their eyes first, and so they would for
yeah,
sure need photography services. Even just as a business owner, it's like that's another hassle for them to come and find photographers, to specifically food photographers in their area who can come and do the photography for them. Like, 100% they're going to need
yeah,
that. So if you just pitch yourself to them first, at least they have that option. And if not, then even like they could recommend you to someone else and they know you're out there. So the services that like you can offer as a food blogger, some people don't
mhm,
put ads on their site, or some people don't offer like restaurant photography. Like, what
mhm.
services do you provide?
I do a lot of sponsored content on Instagram. So for like Instagram posts and reels and stories and all that. And I also do recipe development. So I use the brand's product in a vegan recipe. And depending on how big their budget is, I would either share it on my website or just on Instagram in the captions. So that's what I did for a recent brand. Um, and I also do freelance food photography, and I offer product photography too. I haven't gotten many clients for that yet, but I guess it's mostly because I've been pitching myself for sponsored content more. But yeah, that's also a service that I offer. Um, so yeah, I think those are the main things. So recipe development, sponsored content, food and product photography.
From your concept of like, I want to start this website, what were the major challenges that you encountered to where you are now, and now you're getting clients and you're actually able to monetize it?
I think the biggest challenge for me has been growing my Instagram account. For some reason, I've never had like good luck with using Instagram and like getting lots of followers. And for sponsored content, the more followers you have, the more you can charge. Another challenge would be trying to balance food blogging with school. Um, there's a lot that goes into food photography and food blogging, and those big food bloggers that are doing really well, they put like hours of work in, and they spend all their days trying to hone their craft and building their business. When school went back in person after the pandemic kind of died down a bit, that's when I started losing a lot of the free time that I had. So I kind of had to prioritize school for a bit so that I could focus on getting good grades and whatnot. And I had to put aside my little hobby slash job, or jobby if you would call it. Now I have a little bit more time, so I'm getting back into the gist of things. But yeah, I do think that if I have more time, then I'd be able to grow my business at a faster rate and at a rate that I wanted, so that I could like get more clients and grow my Instagram more.
So I wanted to talk about veganism now. So when, why, how did you go vegan?
So I am not 100% vegan. I would say I'm mostly vegan, but I started out as vegetarian and then I slowly cut out like dairy and eggs. But I guess I'll start my story from the very start when I was 10 years old. So when I was 10 years old, I remember my mom had just watched Cowspiracy, and she came to me all teary eyed and she was like, Ling Ling, eating meat is morally wrong and I think we should stop. And at the time, I didn't have strong opinions of my own, but I realized that our food choices were affecting the animals um, in a really unethical way. And that was enough to convince my innocent and compassionate younger self to stop eating meat. So when I was a bit older, my mom told me that I never actually enjoyed eating meat when I was young, and I distinctly remember grimacing every time I saw my grandmother cut into like a whole chicken or even a fish. And back then, I kind of just went along with it because I was a kid, but I know that I had a feeling of guilt deep down. So it was my mom who first decided to stop eating meat, and I'm really grateful for that because it would have been impossible for younger me to eat a vegetarian diet while living in an omnivorous household. And after we became vegetarian, my mom's cooking actually got better because we started trying a larger variety of my mother's um, cooking that has different fruits and vegetables, and exploring a wider variety of plant-based foods allowed us to expand our culinary skills, mine as well, which I think is a neat bonus. And this is kind of random, but we stopped buying milk when we stopped eating meat, but we still bought eggs. Um, and I also thought that I could never give up cheese and ice cream, but I would later learn that I wouldn't have to make that sacrifice if I were to go vegan because of all the vegan products. So when we stopped buying milk, we drank fortified soy milk to get all the nutrients. I remember in high school, I was so passionate about vegetarianism that for my French oral presentations, I did it on benefits of vegetarianism for 2 or 3 years in a row. And my French teacher is also vegan, so when I learned of this, I felt more inspired to talk about vegetarianism in my French class. And of course, some of my classmates didn't really have an open mind about it, and I got teased and whatnot, but I stood my ground because I knew what I was doing was the right thing. Um, in school, I also took cooking classes as an elective for a couple of years, but I stopped because of my dietary restrictions, and it was a hassle having to bring my own meat substitutes every time we had to cook a meat dish. So, flash forward to a couple of years ago, I became interested in veganism. I learned more about how the eggs and dairy industry impacted animal welfare, and most importantly, how eating a vegan diet benefits your health. So I slowly started transitioning towards a vegan diet, starting with the foods that I cook at home. And I remember thinking it would be impossible to go vegan, but it really does become easier the more you cook vegan foods. So when I started Food by Ling Ling, I knew that I was only going to share vegan recipes because I thought that maybe if I shared enough vegan recipes, I could subconsciously become vegan myself. So I am currently not 100% vegan, though I only cook and bake vegan foods at home, and I will actively try to choose vegan options when I eat out. But there might be times where there are no vegan options available, and in those cases, I will just fall back to vegetarian options. But I would never ever eat meat or seafood. I think what's important for me is how far I've come and my effort to try to do what's best for my body, the environment, and the animals. So I first stopped eating meat for ethical reasons, and then as I got older, I learned of the health benefits, so that also became a reason. And for my school presentations, I also did research on how vegetarianism and veganism affects the environment and helps reduce global warming. So yeah, I guess it was kind of a mix of all those factors that led me to strongly believing and knowing that I don't want to eat meat ever, and I want to consume as less animal products as I possibly can.
Wow, that's a really interesting story that your mom was the one who inspired you to go vegetarian at such a young age
Yeah.
because those documentaries like Cowspiracy and What the Health, like Forks Over Knives, I feel like now and more people are watching it because people are like watching it and sharing it on social media. But when you were 10 years old, well, this was only 7 years ago, so like 2014-ish. At that time, the only vegan milk available in the store was like soy milk, and then maybe like Silk was
Yeah.
made almond milk, but that was about it.
Mhm.
And now like
Yeah.
you can probably tell as well how many options we have. It's crazy
Yeah.
how much it's blown up, but that's really interesting because I don't know anybody whose parents were the one to make that choice. It's always like the younger generation because we have access to all the
Mhm.
information, and usually it's our parents who are like following tradition from like our grandparents. Did your grandparents live with you? Like how did they and the rest of your family adapt to it?
So my grandparents, they live in China and they come visit from time to time. In my household, it's me, my sisters, my mom, and my dad. My dad did not want to go vegetarian, so it's just me, my mom, and my sisters, my two younger sisters. Um, so, because my mom cooks every meal in the house, So if she cooks vegetarian, then we all just eat it. So I'm really glad that that was how it was, because I know that a lot of my friends, they want to try eating less meat, but their parents cook meat and then they have to eat it because they can't cook themselves. So I'm really grateful that it was a lot easier for me to transition to a meatless diet
Mm-hmm.
compared to some other people that might not have this yeah,
Yeah, like the luxury to do that. Like I totally agree.
poetry. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was really lucky too that like I kind of started to learn how to cook when I was in high school, and like my parents gave me the freedom to decide what I want to eat. What tips would you give to people who are still in high school and haven't been had the chance to move out or don't have the luxury to move out? They're still living with their family.
If you just try as best you can to eat less meat, like if you were to cook by yourself on a weekend when your parents are out, or like when you're out with friends at a restaurant and you chose the meatless option, then I think that's already pretty good given the circumstances. But yeah, learning to cook yourself and using those vegan cookbooks out there can really help you expand your kitchen skills before you move out after you graduate from high school, and that will make the transition easier from having your parents cook for you to you cooking yourself, I
Hmm.
guess.
Yeah, and even I think a lot of college campuses now they do offer like vegan options and vegetarian options more so than they did like
Mm-hmm.
say 20 years ago. Some people are like, I want comfort food, like I want my mom's cooking, right? It's like I don't want to maybe go get a random cookbook. I want to cook what she's eating. Well, you could learn to cook the same dish she's cooking, like right, stand next to her. If you're learning, showing your parents that like, hey, I want to learn how to cook it, but just bring a block of tofu instead of the crumbled beef they're using and just make the replacement yourself and just cook side by side. Um,
Yeah,
as long as like you have that conversation. And tofu, I feel like is one of the cheapest like sources of protein, like a
yeah,
block of tofu or a bag of dried beans.
yeah. There's like a lot of meat substitutes out there nowadays.
Yeah.
It's so much easier to go vegan now that it was like 5 years ago when there was nothing.
I know people are like, oh, well, some of these meat substitutes are processed and blah, blah, all that. But I mean, I don't know if you heard of the book How Not to Die.
Yeah, I actually have it on my shelf right
Oh,
now.
you do? It's so interesting because I
Yeah.
was actually talking with somebody like 2 days ago and she also had it on her shelf. And then for some
Hmm.
reason I saw it in somebody's Instagram story this weekend and they were reading it. And I was like, it's so crazy that I've had this book on my list for so long and I just read it a month ago and now I'm seeing it everywhere.
I read a few pages. I mostly just flipped through it for to get some research for a school project that I was doing, but I do intend on reading the whole book at some point when I'm a little less busy. But yeah, like those few pages that I read, I found them really interesting, and I've never like seen veganism described in the way that it is and how it like affects your health that way.
It's evidence-based research, I
Yeah.
think. I think because basically what he does is like the guy himself is a doctor. He doesn't try to push veganism on you or plant based diets on you or anything. He just lays out the
Mhm.
facts. These were legitimate studies done from prestigious universities too, people like who had the funding to do them, and it really proved a lot. They compared a lot of things. If you when you read it, you'll see that they compared side by side, like plant based diets versus vegetarian, even like even how eating a single egg a week can affect you to
Mhm.
omnivorous diets, and it was just very interesting to see all the evidence laid
Yeah.
out. So a lot of people are like, well, processed meats are like vegan meats are very processed, but he actually talks about how they are much less processed and even can help you to reverse disease if you stop eating like white meat and red meat and other types of meat
Mhm.
because of a lot of the things that are put into the animals and like the way animal fat and animal meat breaks down in your body versus plant based meat. What are the biggest misconceptions you feel like people have about going vegan, and how would you address those misconceptions?
For me, the biggest challenge when I was trying to go vegan was resisting to the urge to buy like pastries and desserts every time I went out because I'm a huge fan of sweets. So it was always hard to pass on the opportunity to indulge in cakes and pastries. But not long ago, I started discovering lots of vegan dessert companies in Vancouver, and it also helps that I learned to make a lot of my favorite vegan desserts at home. So I think that was my biggest challenge from transitioning to vegetarian to vegan-ish. So, and for other people, something that a lot of my friends and classmates assume about me when I tell them that I'm mostly vegan is that there's nothing good to eat. And I honestly get excited when they tell me that because I can just smile, pull out my phone, and show them my food blog. Because I think that having my food blog really helped me like be able to convince other people that eating vegan is not as difficult as they think. Like if I didn't have my food blog, I'm not sure how I would be able to prove that I'm like eating really well and like living a healthy life without meat and animal products. Another misconception about going vegan that I'm sure many of you have heard is the whole nutrient deficiency myth that you can't obtain essential nutrients for your body if you don't eat meat and animal products. A month ago, I did my graduation school project on how to eat healthy on a vegan diet, where I used science and facts to outline how someone could thrive and even benefit from a vegan diet. And one of the resources I used was the book that you mentioned, How Not to Die. And I presented my project in the form of an ebook and handed out vegan brownie samples at the showcase.
Wow.
And my goal was to bury the misconception of nutrient deficiency within my friends at school and my peers. And hopefully, I will be able to do this on a larger scale in the future with my university studies and with my blog growing.
How did that go with your project when you were handing out the brownie samples and giving out the ebooks? Like, what were the takeaways you found in the ebook?
So, in my ebook, I basically just like outlined the 6 essential nutrients that our body needs every day. And then I kind of gave some examples of plant-based foods that provide those nutrients. So protein is the one that like most people ask about, like as people who don't eat meat, like where do you get your protein from? So I also made sure to like explain that part a little bit more in depth, how you could get natural protein sources from a lot of the foods that you eat. Tofu is number one because my family's Chinese, so tofu was already part of our diet before we even went vegetarian. There's like a lot of different types of tofu too, so you can never really get sick of it. And there's also beans and legumes, and like those fortified non-dairy beverages sometimes have protein too. Like those Silk products, they're all fortified, I believe.
Yeah.
So they all contain like protein and calcium and all that.
There is also Silk almond cashew milk, if you've seen it in stores, and it has like 8 grams of protein per cup. You could make a latte and it would have 8 grams of protein in it, which is crazy. Like, you can
Yeah.
get your protein hidden in different ways.
Yeah, like I mentioned, when we went vegetarian, we kind of like got to try a lot more fruits and vegetables and like different products that we used to not really think about. And that really helped us like get better at cooking and get more creative in the kitchen and find all these delicious foods to eat. And you mentioned like you can easily get protein through those Silk beverages, and I think that's really true because like there's a lot of foods that we use like dairy products in, like baked goods and beverages, and even some savory stuff. Like I like to make Alfredo sauce with unsweetened cashew milk or something. So yeah, there's a lot of ways to get protein that you don't even realize that you might already be doing.
Growing up in with a Chinese background, right? A lot of the a lot of Chinese dishes are meat based from what I've
Mhm.
seen, and I'm wondering what were some of the hardest dishes to veganize, or were there certain dishes that you're like this maybe has, I don't know, pork belly or something in it, and it's like I don't really have a substitute for it. Like, you just kind of had to phase it out of your diet, or were you able to pretty much replace everything?
Most of the dishes that my mom would cook for us, she would replace the meat with tofu. I remember there's one fish dish where you steam the fish and you add sauce on top, and for that one, we use eggplant instead, and it's also really good. So, for the dishes that you can't really find a substitute, I guess even though we stopped eating them, it like the fact that we discovered a lot more different foods and created a lot more new dishes kind of makes up for that because it's also like a way of like adapting and expanding our palate.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not like only eating like those set dishes, and we're trying new things. Because we live in Vancouver, there's like a lot of different foods from different cultures.
Mm-hmm.
So after we went vegetarian, we also like tried a lot of other different foods like Mexican food and Japanese food and Vietnamese food.
Nice.
So yeah, it wasn't really a sacrifice when we had to quote unquote give up some of our, you know, household staple dishes
I
that has meat.
I really like that because you mentioned the fish that you replaced with eggplant, and it's actually very
Yeah.
interesting. You know how, like, there are certain vegetables that mimic meat. Like eggplant has a meaty texture, and like I wouldn't even have thought of that. It doesn't always have to be tofu or like a high protein thing. Eggplant
Mm-hmm.
also has a lot of nutrients, and like you've probably seen this chicken of the woods mushroom, like the different types of mushrooms that people have been using to make like vegan
Mm-hmm.
chicken, like vegan KFC,
Yeah.
which is crazy to me because when they rip it apart, it looks meaty, but it's a
Yeah.
mushroom. So
Mm-hmm.
actually mushrooms and like walnuts, ground up walnuts work really well as
Mm-hmm.
like beef substitute. I don't know if you've used TVP before.
I don't think I have.
It looks like little dehydrated beef crumbles, and also there's like dehydrated soy curls. Have there been unique things that you've seen in your area in terms of businesses?
Yeah, so Vancouver actually has a lot of vegan stores now. I recently saved all the vegan restaurants and cafes and stores on my Google Maps, and I think there's like 40 something stores on the list, which I think is really cool because when I go out, I can just pull out my
Mm.
maps and like see which one's nearest. But yeah, there's like everything. There's ranging from like Asian food to Western food to desserts to fine dining to fast food. So yeah, there's pretty much everything I think. And I'm really lucky to be living here because of all these delicious foods. I could say there's like everything you could possibly imagine. Like there's also like a vegan butcher store and I don't know, vegan creme brulee and just thinking off the top of my head, vegan soft serve, vegan fast food like burgers and stuff. There's healthy food too, and smoothie bars and coffee shops. Yeah, there's pretty much everything here.
That sounds so good. What are some of your like maybe what are your top places you'd recommend?
So meat spelled MEET, is one of the biggest vegan chain restaurants in Vancouver. They have
Mm.
3 locations, and their menu has a bit of everything. So they have burgers, they have poutine, they have bowls, and they have salads, and it's like really big portions, comfort food kind of stuff. So I really like to go there when I want some comfort food and another vegan restaurant like that started out pretty early, like before a lot of the vegan stores got formed is Chickpea, and they started out as a food truck, but a few years ago they got like a store, and what they sell is also really big portions and comfort foods and like everything chickpea related, like chickpea fries, hummus, and falafels. You know, everything you can make with
Wow.
chickpeas. So that's also really good. So those are the two biggest vegan restaurants in Vancouver that kind of started out like way back before veganism was like that big of a hype. So Meat and Chickpea are also known for their brunch. For desserts, there's this matcha place called Whisk. They're completely plant based and they sell matcha drinks and teas. And they also have soft serve and ice cream, all vegan. And they also have lots of vegan baked goods, like cakes and macarons and bars and everything. I've been going there a lot because their food is just amazing. So there's this donut shop called Cardam's, and they have a few locations in downtown Vancouver. Most of their donuts are vegan. They also sell coffee and stuff, but I'm not a huge donuts fan, so I've only been like a couple of times with my friends, but they do have lots of cool flavors.
Also have not found vegan creme brulee, but you mentioned that there's a place in Vancouver.
Yeah.
What is it called?
I think it's called Vegan Pudding Co.
Oh, okay.
And I went there like a few years ago. I haven't gone in a while. But yeah, they have like really cute creme brulees and different flavors.
Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Since I will be graduating high school this year, I will be going to university next year, and I'm not 100% sure what I will be studying since I'm still waiting to hear back from a few schools. But my hope is that I will get to study food, nutrition, and health or something along the lines, and eventually become a registered dietitian. So hopefully, I will graduate university with my degree in nutrition, and I would still be creating content for Food by Ling Ling. And I'm not sure where my career path will lead me, but I know that I'll always want to do something food related. And I think that with my degree and with my food blog, there's like a lot of options for me to build on those two things
Hmm.
and intertwine them into one big passionate job. So, yeah, hopefully with my studies in university, I can kind of use my expertise in my food blog and incorporate some nutrition related stuff into my food blog and use the audience that I have built to share veganism with more people and use a more science based approach and facts based approach for like people who appeal to those kind of things more than ethics or just the food itself. I do think that I want to study something that relates to my passion for food and veganism. My goal is to try to combine my studies in university and my food blog and then create like a bigger platform um, with more nutrition related stuff so that I could appeal to more people like in a different way,
Hmm.
and kind of build on my credibility.
When if you're a nutritionist, especially in like a plant-based nutritionist, people are going to be more willing to listen to somebody who has the credentials to back them up. To make yourself credible, one way is of course to, do a degree related to that, but the other thing is you also have a food blog, and when you've been vegan for so many years and you've been making vegan recipes with those ingredients that you're advocating for, you have the credentials on top of having the blog. So you're kind of like advocating for both through the other. So it's awesome. I think that really
Yeah.
goes hand in hand. Where can people find you on social media?
So I have all the social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest, but I'm most active on Instagram. And feel free to shoot me a DM. I would love to chat. And you can also reach out to me via email, but it's mostly brands that do that. So yeah, find me on Instagram. I'm really active on there. It's Food by Ling Ling, and yeah.
And what's your website? Like, where can people find you on your website name?
My website is foodbylingling.com.
Lastly, what would be your biggest tips for somebody who wants to be where you are now but has no idea where to start?
Do what you love and do best and create delicious food. Share your creations on Instagram and surround yourself with other food bloggers and make friends with people who are at the same stage as you so you can have like a network of food bloggers to support you and support each other. So, as for the business aspect, I would recommend taking courses, listening to podcasts, and don't be afraid to ask lots of questions. There are a lot of super nice and amazing food bloggers out there that would not hesitate to ask your questions. When I first started out, I was confused about a lot of things, but I gained the courage to like ask some of the big food bloggers, and they helped me out. If you ever have any questions for me, I would love to help you out as well. You can just send me a DM on Instagram. If you're someone who likes to be guided every step of the way, I would recommend you invest in an all in one course like Foodtography School. This way, all the resources that you'll need are in one place. When I first started out, I kind of pieced together information from various sources because that's just how I like to learn. But there's definitely a bit of a learning curve there because you have to figure a lot of stuff out by yourself. But yeah, in general, just surround yourself with food bloggers, people whose work that you love, and reach out to help whenever you need.
Well, you said you had reached out to bigger food bloggers, right? And they had helped you. I really like that. Did you just cold DM them on Instagram and like they were just super helpful in response to your question? Like,
So I first started reaching out to bigger food bloggers after listening to like some podcasts. Like it was the food photography corner with Flax and Sugar and Rosalind Maria. I generally just reach out to the food bloggers who like explicitly say like, oh, I would love to help you if you have any questions about what we talked about today or like one of my resources. Like, I'm also really shy, so I try to make sure that I'm not like bothering them too much, I guess, when I reach out to them, that they're like they're actually like open to helping people. Because some big food bloggers, they do have like resources that you can buy. So they might not feel as inclined to answer your questions, but if you like just ask smaller questions, I guess, and not for stuff that requires a lot of explanation, then I think it should be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would have like a really specific question on contracts or something, and I would just want clarification after what I listened to on a podcast. So I would DM them and ask for a bit of clarification, and they would be happy to explain things to me and recommend some other resources for me as well. So I think that was really nice. It's definitely a good way to learn. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for inviting me onto the podcast. It's such an honor to talk to you about everything, and I hope that people listening find inspiration, I guess. And if anyone has any questions or just want to reach out, you can DM me on Instagram at foodbilingual. I would love to connect.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning into today's episode, and we'll see you next time.